Mayor Brandon Johnson, thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time today.
Of course.
I can't fathom how busy your day is, so I always appreciate to have a few moments.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, by the way.
We're all in this together. Let's start with something that I think is overlooked often in corporate media that I want to call out because I think it's one of the most successful things that you've accomplished in your time. How does it feel to preside over the largest drop in homicides in Chicago in more than half a century?
Well, listen, community safety, that is my top priority as mayor of Chicago. And I can tell you there was a time in which, especially going back to the 90s, but even as early as 2022, where in the 90s, 900 to nearly 1,000 people being murdered every year in our city. Just in 2022, 2021, 700, 800 people being murdered. And the people who are being murdered are between the ages of 10 and 24, and they're black, right? So we're talking about black boys and black young men who are overwhelmingly impacted by gun violence. And I made it my top priority. And as a result of many of the critical investments that we've made last year, we had the fewest amount of homicides in 60 years. And just this past July, we had the fewest amount of homicides for the month of July or any month in the last 50 years.
And a lot of that has been tied to the violence intervention programs that you've helped champion. Again, this is a huge accomplishment that as I talk to people, they don't know enough about. And I attribute that to corporate media being more focused on clicks than on actual service to the community. Can you share a little bit about that, about why these programs are so effective and why funding for these programs is so effective, not just to address the epidemic of gun violence, but to prevent it in the first place?
That's right, and prevention is the key, right? And look, one act of violence is one too many. And even with the progress that we're making, those who have been impacted by violence, those statistics mean very little, right? And my job at this point, and I've made it very clear, my mission is to build the safest, most affordable big city in America. The way you do that is by investing in people. The safest communities across America all have that in common. They invest in people. Somehow that message or that plot was lost. But what I did since taking office, we invested in community violence intervention. Absolutely. Our CVI workers, these are individuals who have been justice involved, have returned back to the communities in which they were traumatized in, and now they're providing reprieve and support and inspiration in these communities. Where CVI workers are present, we've seen reductions as high as 45 to 50%, right? But it's also about investing in young people. Youth employment is critical. Last summer, we broke records, over 31,000 young people with summer jobs. This summer, we're gonna break that record, over 32,000 young people for summer jobs through the Shy Youth Works program that we have expanded. The communities where we hired the most amount of young people is where we saw the greatest decline in violence and particularly homicides, right? But so it's a combination. It's the full force of government showing up across the board, but it really is centered around investing in the very communities that have been historically locked out of the economic prowess of Chicago.
And I think that's a point that often gets lost, that if you want public safety, you invest in the public. It's not just about having a larger police budget. It's not just about having more armed patrolmen. It's about actually addressing the social injustices that people are suffering through. And it sounds like that's one of the big reasons we're seeing a drop. What are your thoughts on pieces of legislation like the Rifle Act that didn't quite make it through the state legislature this time? Is that a bill that you support, or what modifications would you want to see?
Well, we definitely have to get control over weapons, illegal weapons, war type weapons that are coming into streets across America. In fact, we removed over 11,000 weapons off the streets of Chicago just last year. All of those weapons arrived in Chicago from states that voted for Donald Trump. I always say that the Trump administration is concerned about the wrong border. Right? I mean, if we're talking about saving lives and protecting people, we have to have like real comprehensive and very obvious gun control measures, because those weapons that make it into the hands of individuals that have been tormented and traumatized, that leads to the type of violence that we've experienced. And so yes, I'm going to continue to push and promote policies that invest in people while also protecting our cities from these high-powered weapons that are designed for war.
Again, just to reiterate the point, it's no accident that we're seeing this drop in homicides. It's the result of proven policies, and we can elevate those. I want to shift gears a little bit, because when we talk about the way the city's politics works, I would argue the influence of billionaires is one of the biggest.
I knew
cancers.
that's where you were going. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is true, right? We got Michael Sachs, who, notoriously helped shut down 50 Chicago public schools, devastating the South and West Side. Now coming back for a second round with someone who shall remain nameless running for your seat, and investing a significant amount of resources in there. I guess this is more a philosophical question. Across the board, Americans agree that billionaires have too much power. What do we need to do to make that connection, that power comes from them buying politicians to do their bidding?
Yeah, well, look, you're absolutely right. Whether it's Michael Sachs or others like him, they have wanted desperately to shape government in their image, and that image is essentially those who have get more, and those with less receive less, right? And the school closures was one of the most tragic policies ever carried out by an administration across this country. Yeah. Those school communities that are still reeling from that disinvestment. In fact, violence is more pervasive in communities where school closures took place. And so I think it's incumbent upon the working class in this moment to really seize control and power of our own destiny. Yeah. For too long, we've sort of left it to chance. Yeah. And I believe now that we have to be more intentional. In my work, I've worked hard to organize as a former public school teacher and an organizer within the labor movement to build more political power amongst working class folks, Black, brown, white, Asian, all different regions of the city of Chicago. That's how I became mayor. We just saw some good news in Michigan and some good news in Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah. Two incredible progressive leaders that won their primaries and now go on to the general to win. The way we build power is by seizing it, essentially, right? And being willing to protect that power once we actually receive it.
Speaking of, it's easy in hindsight to say, well, that was the right decision, or that was a morally correct decision. You took a big political risk, many would argue, by casting the tie-breaking vote to call for a ceasefire for the genocide in Palestine at a time when it was extraordinarily unpopular. You were new to the seat. You could have used that political power for a lot of reasons. You used it for something extraordinarily important. Now, years later, you have the UN confirming this is a genocide, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, Israel Physicians for Human Rights, an Israeli-based human rights organization, Bet Salim, another Israeli human rights organization, Omar Bertov, an Israeli scholar at Brown University. The list goes on and on, all saying that yes, this is genocide. It is indefensible. We need to stop arming Netanyahu and this genocidal regime. It's easy now, right? It's easier now. But you said this when nobody else was willing to, or too few were willing to. You were the first leader of a major city to say this. Yeah. I want you to talk about kind of what went through your mind in making that decision and what impact it's had since then.
I will say the loss of life has just been absolutely just horrific. You think about the Palestinian people who have desperately called for not just simply independence, but self-determination. Yeah. And that's a basic human, right. And any human need is a human right as far as I'm concerned. And, when I took that vote, it wasn't just about the vote, it was the work to undermine the vote as well. Because for the record, I was not necessarily prepared to cast a vote because we went into that city council meeting with enough votes to pass this resolution. Yeah. And Michael Sachs and others began to pick people off and threatening them, right, essentially. And casting that vote, it made me think about the words of Dr. King, his understanding of the three evils, right? Whether it's racism,
poverty or militarism.
Right? And I come from a tradition of Black liberation theology. Yeah. And that doesn't just apply to my existence, right? That applies throughout humanity. And I was proud quite frankly, to carry out the legacy of my ancestors who fought for liberation in this country and even abroad. And even when I called it for what it was, genocidal. This was right before the Democratic National Convention.
Right.
And at a time in which buses were still being sent from the state of Texas to further divide our communities, because it was just all sort of captured by extreme right-wingism in this country, I felt it my responsibility, the moral responsibility, to take the stance that I did, and I don't have any regrets for it, not at all.
How does it feel watching the rest of the country catch up to where you were 3 years ago?
Well, I mean, honestly, I consider that a victory. I mean, that's what it's about. That's what our leadership should do, right? And as a leader, you're out front for a reason, right? And sometimes you have to bring people along, and sometimes, you know, as much as people might want you to slow down so other folks can catch up, there were lives that were being lost.
Yeah.
There was no time to waste. And the fact that now, you know, people recognize that the position that I took, you know, a couple of years ago now was not only the right decision, but it was a righteous decision.
Yeah.
I see this as a further example of why bold, progressive leadership that comes from the working class is so critical.
Yeah. Speaking of that, one of the criticisms of your administration is that when we talk about taxing billionaires, when we talk about making them pay their fair share, making corporations pay their fair share, we just don't have enough votes to get it done. So it's unrealistic. It's pie in the sky. I disagree with that criticism, but it is there. I wanted to give you the chance to address that and kind of address a broader narrative of this is how democracy works, that the wealthy just simply pay their fair share so everyone can have more.
Now, listen, the way budgets have been balanced historically, it's always been irresponsible and reckless. It's the same sort of neoliberal codification of white supremacy, essentially, right? And just because it's neoliberal, it doesn't mean it's less harmful than what right-wing extremism is pushing in this country. And in fact, I could make the easy argument that neoliberal politics has led to fascism, right? And so for me, it's clear that the best way to balance budgets, but more importantly, the best way to invest in everyday people, working people, is by challenging the ultra rich, those with means to put more skin in the game. And this is crucial, particularly at a time in which Donald Trump carried out the largest upward transfer of wealth into the hands of the ultra rich and these big corporations than any other time in the history of our country. And it came at the expense of the very 5 demands that descendants of the formerly enslaved fought for: education, housing, transportation, healthcare, good paying jobs. I'll add a friendly amendment to that, and that's environmental justice as well. And so when you look at all the cuts across the board at the expense of the upward transfer of wealth at the expense of working people, it's only right that the bare minimum a Democrat should do, whether you are progressive or not, the bare minimum should be to challenge the ultra rich. And so here's what we've done in Chicago. The first of its kind, the social media amusement responsibility tax. It's a tax on big tech companies, social media conglomerates. It's the first of its kind. And that tax right now, though we're going through litigation and we feel good about prevailing in our litigation, has overperformed. We're on pace to generate 57% more revenue than we initially projected. And here's the key, because it's important that taxpayers know where the resources are going. All of the revenue is going directly towards mental and behavioral health care. When Mayor Harold Washington died, there were 19 mental health clinics. He was the first Black mayor. When I was sworn in, we were down to 6.
Wow.
Well, I reopened 3, expanded our CARE program, Crisis Assistance Response Engagement. This is a program that releases paid behavioral mental health professionals to show up at a mental health crisis instead of a police officer. The revenue that we're generating from big tech companies, these huge conglomerates, these corporations who are making billions and billions of dollars, is going to go directly towards a public good. Now, there are other measures that we're pushing for, a millionaire's tax. That's something that unfortunately City Council blocked a resolution that would have placed it on the ballot for voters to decide. But we have other bodies of government that's supporting our effort. So look, the bottom line is this. In order for us to build safe and affordable communities, not just in Chicago, but across the country, the ultra rich have to pay their fair share in taxes. And the city of Chicago is leading the way, the first of its kind tax on big tech companies that the governor of Illinois followed my lead and instituted the same one at the state level.
I want to add one point that you made about neoliberalism enabling fascism. Anyone who is offended by that comment should remember that Dr. King said that white moderates are worse than the KKK. And he did not stutter when he said that.
He most certainly didn't.
And so I think that's such an important line to draw, because until we recognize that cancer for what it is, we can't properly excise it. Now, Mayor, I did ask the public for questions that they wanted me to ask you. Right. And one of the most common questions was, are you running for re-election?
Well, I will say this, there's a lot to celebrate, over these first 4 years.
Yeah.
Again, I don't believe there's a mayor in modern history that has served in this capacity where our economy was growing and violence was going down. Right? There are more people visiting our city than any other time in the history of Chicago. $20 billion of economic impact as a result. We're going to break that record again this year, and we are on pace to yet again to see historic lows in violence. What I will say is that, as I weigh that decision, the rationale behind being thoughtful in this moment is because I do not want the politics to get in the way of the governance. And the way things work in Chicago, politics is what people prefer to cover versus the fact that we've invested $2.6 billion on the south side, $2 billion on the west side. The corporate media doesn't want to cover that. They want to cover the show. But before the show begins, I want to make sure that people are paying attention to the substance of the work, because that's what I was elected to do.
I'm going to read between the lines on that one and assume it's a yes, but we'll go on. This question I got by a number of folks, and it was framed in this way, that we know the mayor has nothing but love for his brother in New York City, but how does it feel to you personally to have him get so much credit for work that you were doing long before he came on the national scene?
I mean, listen, we're proud of the fact that, Chicago is the global epicenter for progressive politics. Just last week, Dr. Bernice King, the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., came and walked the very steps that her father walked through Marquette Park when he stood up to tyranny here in this city. And when Dr. King left, as difficult as his experience was in Chicago, here's what he said: that if we can do it in Chicago and we do it right in Chicago, we can do it anywhere in the world. So the fact that other people are doing it well, it means we're fulfilling the prophecy of Dr. King.
That's beautiful. And then the very last question is, how are you holding up in general? How's your mental health? How are you staying in shape? What are you listening to nowadays? An audiobook or music? What's your vibe to just wind down after a tough day?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have a loving family. My wife and 3 children, my 12, 14, and 18-year-old who we just dropped off at college last week, and he's going to study accounting and finance. The cute story about my eldest son, apparently I talked about public education so much, he even chose a public institution in Illinois to get his degree in at Eastern Illinois. So go Panthers. But just spending time with family, exercising. There's men's Bible study on Thursdays at my church. I try to go and participate there. And then really I draw strength from the people of Chicago. Look, I get what the corporate media is trying to do. They're trying to intimidate us and to make us afraid so we stop doing the work. I go all over the city of Chicago where people encourage me. They remind me to eat healthy because, Mayor Harold Washington had some proclivities there that, folks were concerned about. But really it's about just staying grounded and connected in community. That's my safest space.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate you.
Thank you, brother.